Okay, good evening, students of Conversation 3. First of all, I'll address my appearance. It is a holiday today. Happy birthday, Buddha. So I'm wearing another Oilers shirt. That's because it's a holiday, so I don't have to dress up. That's my opinion. And this is my office, so the dress code is not being enforced. Tomorrow is Friday, and this is week 8, and we have a new topic to cover. As I told you, everybody from this class has followed the instructions very well. This must be because you're not freshmen and you're upper year students. So you don't have to hand in any of the assignments from now on. I still am processing them and preparing feedback for you. So you can certainly, some students have sent me their paragraphs, which is fantastic, but I'm not going to respond to them, and I'm not going to check them or grade them. But it's good that you go through the process of writing a paragraph on each topic, because that is beneficial for you. I still have not gotten a haircut. I don't like my hair, and I want to get a haircut, but in a sense, I am Canadian, as you know, and there are people in North America that are unable to get a haircut, and there's a lot of, if you look at the celebrities, if you look on YouTube, you can see a ton of celebrities who are unshaven with really shaggy hair. Some people are getting their husbands or wives to cut their hair, or their friends to cut their hair, or they're cutting their own hair. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but sooner or later I'm going to have to do something about this because it's just getting out of control. We have been locked down for almost 3 months, and I have some fantastic news. I looked at the report earlier today at the Korean CDC, and apparently there were no new domestic cases, 0. All I can say is, wow. Even China, I think, hasn't managed to do that yet. We were the second worst hit country in the world back in February, and now we have 4 international cases. There's 4 quarantine people that came through the airport, and they were quarantined, and there was nobody tested positive in the whole country. That's fantastic news, but I think the thing that allowed that to happen is the policy that we have followed, and which means that we are not going to the classroom at all this semester. Our university decided not to take the risk, and despite the fact we have 0 new cases, we're not going to go in the classroom, and we're going to only meet each other in the exam. So I'm thrilled to announce that, and I'm totally supportive of that policy. I still wear my mask when I go outside. I know there's a very, very tiny risk, but I mean, I've been wearing a mask for 3 months. I feel weird when I don't wear a mask outside, so it doesn't matter anyway. Anyway, that's great news for all of us, that the risk of us getting sick right now is very low, so you can go out and I hope you enjoyed the beautiful weather today. It was 25 degrees. My face is a bit red because I was out in my farm this morning. I don't have a farm, I'm just renting some land. I just call it my farm. And I was outside this afternoon with my kids. So here we are. Happy birthday, Buddha, and congratulations, Korea, for that achievement. Let's keep it going. We're going to talk about spending and saving. That's chapter 7 in the textbook. Takeaway English 4 is what we're using. I threw up sort of, I don't think in this class I've used this board. This is a tiny little, this is much smaller. Usually I have an entire wall to work with, so I can't really write very much. So I just wrote this up before in preparation for this lecture. I just threw this up here. So the topic here, they're going to give you a lot of vocabulary. Right away in the chapter it says, the words receipt, tip, debt, finances, discount, budget, cash. So this topic has anything to do with money, essentially, okay? So let's just say that I'm gonna approach this, I'm not gonna call it spending and saving, I'm gonna call it money management, okay? And this is a life skill. it doesn't matter what major you have, what major you're in, what you're studying. Some of you are not English majors. There are quite a few in this class, actually, who are in science or business or other majors, engineering. And you may not have taken any classes that really instructed you on how to manage money. And I can't, in one lecture, give you enough information or improve your perspective or skill in managing money. But I'm just going to give you examples that will maybe get you started. When you're a young person and you don't have as much money, you don't need those skills as much. But things get, once you graduate and once you get a job, and then you have to file your taxes, and maybe you get married, or maybe you don't get married, but maybe you buy some property, or you invest in stocks, or I don't know, you lend some money to somebody, or there's all kinds of scenarios that can go on. You should keep track of where the money is going, how much is coming in and how much is going out, and where it's coming from and where it's going to. And so this is an expression, it's an idiom, but it's not an idiom, it's not a proverbial statement, it's not something that's an old lady says or something, it's very accurate, it's a metaphor. Money is a liquid. So it's not a factual statement, it's just a comparison between the way that money behaves and the way that a liquid behaves. So essentially, what it means is that a liquid conforms to its space. That's sort of a characteristic of liquid. If you put it in a container, it will stay there. But if you just pour it onto the floor, it will spread out and follow whatever, contours there are for it to move. It will move towards the lowest point. And it's essentially, if you spend money like that, if you take my meaning, if you just spend money everywhere, the money will just dissipate. And then as you make more money and you have more money, you'll realize that if you don't keep track of it, it just disappears. It just flows. But this is an economic model too, because that's the benefit of money. Hundreds of years ago, before the commercial revolution and the creation of paper money, there were all kinds of different ways of spending money. Money was usually precious metals like gold or silver or copper or some combination of those metals, and the coins were minted and they were weighed for their value, for their precious metal content. And often in English we call that type of money specie, which means like tangible, hard metal currency that you can I mean, paper money can just be torn up and it can be printed anywhere. It's just a very complicated process, so it takes a lot of effort to duplicate it. But like the chemical characteristics and the physical characteristics of silver and gold are attractive to people, especially a long time ago, because they can verify that is what you have, and that's a value that most humans agreed upon. In North America, for example, they used to trade shells, and that because they didn't mine gold and mint it in North America, there was the form of currency was these belts of things, and they included these strings of precious shells. And it's the same idea, something that everybody agrees upon as a currency, because otherwise, if you have a cow and you want a fish, you got to trade the cow for 100 fish, but you don't want 100 fish, you only want one fish. So what are you supposed to do? This is what people encountered when they're dealing with a society that's based on barter instead of money. But money can move around really freely, and it's almost moves, in some cases I feel like it moves too easily. Now we have digital money, so you don't even have to actually physically give somebody a piece of paper. You don't have to sign anything. you just press a button and then the money moves electronically. And you probably think that's fine because you never grew up, having a different system. But my parents and your grandparents, they would have not thought that was cool. Like if they worked all day or they worked for a month and then the employer said, well, I just sent you some numbers to your bank, and then you'll just have that in your bank. They would have said, no. Give me show me the money. Give me the cash. Or in Canada or America, write me a check. I used to get paychecks. So there was a piece of paper and it had a number on it, and then there was a signature, and then I had to take that check physically. I know this sounds weird to you, but 20 years ago, this is what we did. Before the digital, commercial revolution, there's no direct deposit. So I used to actually take my paycheck, which was written on a piece of paper, and I go to the bank, and the bank would verify the transaction, and then they would, sign off on it and stamp it, and then they would transfer the money from my employer's account to my account. And if I lost the check, I didn't get the money. And I would have to say, please, boss, I lost my check. Can you please write me another one? And I think that did actually happen a couple times. And my boss did, because he was nice, wrote another check and I cashed it. So you can go in the bank and say, give me the cash, or you can just say, put it in my account, and they keep track of it. Anyway, so money is a liquid, and we have all kinds of stuff now. Soon, maybe in another generation, we will have all these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything else. And maybe we'll just, have sort of a USB, key or something, a hard drive or a digital wallet, and you'll just stick the thing, and then you'll transfer the money from your account directly. And you can just carry your account around in your pocket, and you have the password and you have the key, so only you can access it. We'll see what happens, but this is all part of, money management. This is what's coming up. But let's get into just the approach you should take. So money management, like this is, again, like all my other topics, it's a very wide open topic. If you want to talk about the future of money, or you want to talk about, I've already just given you a few examples. If you want to talk about how money was before, if you want to talk about 2,000 years ago, when the Romans made silver and gold coins, and minted things, and we still, this is one way that we can check evidence of the culture and where the Romans actually were, is that we find coins, all over Europe and North Africa and in Syria and so on. We find these coins and they're like, oh yeah, the Roman Empire was here because they're the coins. You can talk about any of those things, or you can take a different approach. You don't have to use a historical example or analyze a future currency. You can just talk about how to manage the money, like how to be responsible. So this is a term. It's a really useful expression to know. Fiscal responsibility. It usually applies to a company or to a business, an organization, an institution, or a government. So fiscal responsibility means just not spending without being careful. It means just fiscal responsibility means being careful about money. But a lot of people are not. This is a big problem, actually, because people in Korea, there is a term called household debt, which is how much money your family owes to other people or institutions or banks or whatever. But you owe how much money the average person owes, and in Korea it's a large amount of money. Everybody owes money to the bank. That's not strange. In Canada, it's worse. In America, it's even worse than that. In general, most developed countries have this system where you're allowed to borrow money, and it takes you a long time to pay that money back. And it's kind of an advantage if you borrow money and you invest it into something else, and that investment makes more money than the cost of borrowing, then you're making a profit. So it's not necessarily a problem, but when the average amount of debt gets too high, it can tip the scales, and then you can have a big problem. Like you can have a national problem. You are all too young to remember, and I wasn't here, but in 1997, there was something called the IMF crisis in Korea, where a whole bunch of big Korean companies went bankrupt and people lost their jobs. And that was because the borrowing got out of control and people were not able to pay their debts. And so companies and individuals went bankrupt all at the same time. And this created a financial crisis from which Korea, recovered and became even more successful afterwards. But we certainly don't want to go through that, event again. And the coronavirus is causing this sort of pressure on the economy and on personal, debt. Like if you lose your job right now and you can't pay your debt, then you might have to file for bankruptcy, and then you lose everything, and you can't borrow money for a long time. That's the way it works. So fiscal responsibility means having enough money, not living on the edge and not spending money beyond your limitations so that you can manage your money effectively. How do you execute fiscal responsibility? Well, one way is to actually calculate exactly where you spend the money. Some people just spend money on their credit cards, including me, and at the end of the month they're like, oh, Beckman one. That, I don't remember spending that. And then you're like, oh, this month it was Oshiman one. Like, oh, that's much better. Well, that must have been because I stayed at home for a month because of the coronavirus. But, you don't track it carefully. And budgeting means, okay, I need this amount for food. I need this amount for clothing. I need this amount for entertainment. I need this amount for rent, for internet, for my phone. I need this amount for my gas for my car. I need you allocate, you budget. So there's a budget is an expectation of what you're going to spend. And then you can compare, if you're smart and you're careful, you budget a certain amount, and at the end of the month, you try to hit those numbers. And you can exceed the budget, overspend, or you can, underspend. You can spend less, and then you can, meet your goals and spend less than what you expect, which doesn't happen very often. Trust me. And I'm sure if you try to budget, you realize that if you are reasonable about your budget and you're careful, then you can stay within your limits. But it's not that easy because spending gets out of control really quickly. So this is what you need to do. Predict how much you're going to spend, and then try to keep yourself, within those limits, and or close to those limits. And that's what budgeting means. A nest egg is a nice expression, I think, because it means that you should always think about, even though you're young and you haven't even gotten a job yet. So I just want to get a job. Professor Sullivan, shut up. I'm not worried about when I'm 75 years old. I'm 23 and I just want to get a job and get my life going. I understand that, but as soon as you get the job, which should be soon, I know that the job market's pretty crap right now, but people complain about the job market all the time. It's rare that people are like, oh yeah, I just got my job really easily. As I told you when we talked about the job, chapter, it's very rare that a generation of people that just finishes education and it's just like, oh, there's lots of jobs waiting for me. Frequently, my grandfather, my great-grandfather it's my great-grandfather. My grandfather was born just before the Great Depression, and my great-grandfather was trying to find work during the Great Depression. That was a similar or worse environment than now. And he did it. He had to work hard. He got less. Things cost less though too when the economic environment is poor. Like right now, we're working with deflation right now, so prices of things are falling because people have less money to spend, which does help because you don't need to earn as much money in order to meet your costs. But regardless, a nest egg is something that you save so that when you're finished working, you have a nice nest, a place to live and be comfortable when you're done. And that's why it's called a nest egg. The egg is the gold, the money that you save. This is your pension. And I know Koreans usually think of pension, you think of like a cottage or a condo or a place you stay for vacation. But what I mean by pension is, in the North American sense, is it's the money that you save for your retirement. And so you put this money away. It could be your house, which is the value that you will use to keep yourself going when you retire. It could be stocks. It could be savings accounts. It could be bonds. It could be any number of things. But it's basically, a nest egg is all the money that you've worked for that you haven't spent. And you don't spend it on your children. You don't spend it on yourself. You just keep it until you retire. And then that allows you to just have a comfortable life until you expire, right? For the last 20 years of your life or whatever. If you retire when you're 65 or 70, then you have enough to keep going for 20 years. And that wealth that you have is called a nest egg. This is just a quick little expression that I want to share with you because my grandfather grew up in the Depression, as I just said, and he was a very frugal person. Frugal means being very careful with your money and not spending. It doesn't mean being greedy with your money or not sharing or not being generous. It just means just thinking carefully before you spend money. Just when you spend money, try to get a discount or wait until there's a good opportunity, or don't buy things that you don't need. And when you spend money, keep track of it. That's frugal behavior, okay? It's a positive thing. It's not a negative thing. This is what my grandfather said. He said, take care of the pennies and the dollars will take care of themselves. So anytime you're spending money, don't just say like, oh, well, it's just manwon, or it's just 10%, or it's just $1, or it's like, oh, I can't remember what I spent here or there. If you pay attention to the small amounts of money, they quickly add up, and that over time, that money, those small amounts of money will go in your piggy bank, and that piggy bank will go in your bank account, and that bank account will earn interest, and then when you're older, that money will increase the size of your nest egg, essentially. And my grandfather was not a rich person, but he enjoyed his life when he was retired. He lived alone in the forest in a house that he designed and had built himself. And he went on bus tours. He didn't like airplanes, so he went on bus tours, and he went all over North America, and he went out for dinner, and he met his friends, and then he went to a retirement home, and he lived there for a few years, and then he passed away, and he left some money to his children and his grandchildren, and that was because he was frugal, and he took care of his money, and there are many other reasons that I loved my grandfather, but that was one of the things that was very impressive, I thought, that he never came across as somebody who was excessively wealthy or poor. He just was solidly middle class and hardworking, and he never had money problems. There was not a whisper of, I need money from anyone, or I'm giving money from anyone. He sent money to us for our birthdays or bought us toys. But he just took care of himself, and he was able to do that because of his fiscal responsibility. So that's something, it's a very, very helpful thing for you. Not only because it's going to help you live your life without being in danger of being poor and not having a house and not having enough to support yourself, but also because money problems stress you out. you know, if you're not careful with money, then it's going to it's going to stress you out, and it's going to make you unhappy. And it's going to cause problems with your relationships with your family, and maybe with your boyfriend or girlfriend or your husband or wife. These are realities that you have to deal with. So I would like you don't have to be super serious about it. I am sort of being serious now, but you have a lot of different options. You can just tell me, you can even tell me an experience. I mean, I didn't tell you about the negative things, but I learned when I was a freshman that this was important because I ran out of money. Lots of Koreans are supported by their parents while they go through university, and some parents are very lenient and give you more money if you run out, but some Korean parents are not. They say, this is how much money you have, don't ask me for any more money, deal with it. And so the Korean student is like, well, I want more money, so I'm going to get a part-time job. And that teaches you to be more careful with your money. So if you want to talk about your part-time job, or you want to talk about you spend too much money on clothing and you regret it, it doesn't really matter. You can express it in a negative way or a positive way. You can talk about yourself, or you can talk about a concept, or you can talk about money as a historical phenomenon if you want to look up some stuff. But remember, the criteria, as usual, is prepare your topic, make sure it's organized, make sure you can say it in about 2 minutes, focus on something in particular and explain it in detail, and then you'll receive a better score when I finally see you in June for the exam interview. Okay? So that is all I have for you today. Again, happy birthday, Buddha, and I hope you enjoyed your holiday. I will talk to you again next week. Have a good night.